this is my Petrol Mobility Scooter that I've just finished building. Originally I was going to use this transaxle here, which is the original transaxle out of the scooter. I was going to take off this motor and design an input shaft here to couple with the petrol engine so that I can make use of the existing axle and the differential that's in here. But as I was about to do that, I came across Colin Furze's build on YouTube, and I thought for the first one I'd copy that. So here it is, it's all running. The key does the ignition, and the various switches here, horn, lights are working, and the start button down there, it's just not starting because the fuel's turned off. I'll take it to bits, or I'll take the covers off and explain what I did differently to Colin Furze and what was a pain in the ass, what wasn't. The tools that I had in my garage, I've got an air compressor, I've got a MIG welder, and a what else? A bench grinder, various hand power tools. I've got a big drawer of various nuts and bolts. The things that I didn't have were a mill and a lathe, which made some of it a bit of a pain in the ass, but I'll strip it down and you can see what's what. So here it is with the covers off the back. So the engine is 110cc semi-auto. So it's got 4 gears, but it's got an automatic clutch, which means you don't have to mess around with the clutch cable. The axle was relatively straightforward. I used a slightly different bearing for the centre bearing, just because it was easier to make that adjustable. The caliper was a little bit of a pain in the arse, just because I had to weld up that brake disc, and it wasn't quite true, but it's actually turned out fine. The exhaust was a real pain in the ass. As you can see, I ended up using a bit of 25mm flexible hose for that, and it's worked fine. And it means that the exhaust can be moved slightly once you've installed it, which is quite handy. I made this frame that goes over the engine, the whole frame completely unboltable, so I could just unbolt that and lift it off to get access to the engine. And the engine's mounted to the top mount of the engine is mounted to that frame as well. Annoyingly, on this particular scooter, there wasn't room to hide the engine and carb away, so I just put them out front. They're all different, these mobility scooters, and the cover is smaller on some of them than others, and you can see there's just no way there was going to be space. I couldn't really put the axle much further forward than that. Maybe I could have gone a tiny bit more, but it wouldn't have made enough difference. What was a pain in the ass? Right, the gear change was a bit of a pain in the ass to do. Not because the design of it was difficult, and it's a pretty simple design, as I'll show you. You can see it's just the standard kind of rocker, of just a rocker shaft. There it is under there. The problem with it is ground clearance. I had to modify it a bunch of times so that this didn't hit the ground, and as you can see by the witness marks there, it still hits the ground on a reasonably regular basis. I fed the hydraulic brake pipe all the way through the frame. What else? Fuel tank in the basket, which is out of an old cart I had lying around. The the brake caliper, I bought one that has a handbrake on it, so you can pull it back and then push this down, which holds it in place. What else? These bits in here where you have to put where the axle has a keyway to accept the mobility scooter wheels. This was a real pain to do. I did it with an angle grinder and a Dremel, but it took ages to get it right. Other than that, pretty straightforward build, really. The ground clearance was the only real issue that I had. The wiring's all very simple. The front end remains totally standard. The only you notice, obviously, not having a diff. It makes it quite difficult to turn at low speed, and it makes it quite unstable at high speed. You certainly wouldn't want to be doing 50 mile an hour on this, although it is capable of it. Yeah, that's it really. I've stuck a few videos of it being driven, so you can see what it's like. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward build, easy to do without a mill really. It's just a mill and a lathe make things a little bit easier. But as I said, it's the axle is the only thing you really need a mill for, and without it, it's not a major issue. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to have lots of bits lying around. Most of this stuff, in fact, I had lying around. The only thing I didn't have was these bearings, which I had to buy. But I had lots of bits of steel. I had some old box section, which I was able to use to make all this frame up. And I had an old galvanized steel girder at the bottom of the garden, which I was able to use to make this bracket for the disc brake. Just make sure you grind off as much of the galvanized stuff as you can first, because it doesn't weld very nicely and it's supposed to not be very good for you. So yeah, that's it really.